Oh. Om Satchidanandarupaya Vishwotpattyadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditarataschaarteshvabhignaswarat Tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah Tejo varimridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrsha Dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirmatsaranam satam Vedyam vastavamatra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parerishwaraha Sadyo Hridyavarudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubistatchana. Hari Om and greetings from Cleveland. Prince Arjuna is the ideal worldly human. He's the best looking, he's the most intelligent, he's the wealthiest. One of his names is Dhananjaya. He is everyone that we all want to be. And one special point about Prince Arjuna, he's also learned. I did say worldly human, so then we think just a corporate success or a competitive success. Also learned. He knows about the Veda. He knows Sanskrit. Yet, when he's faced with intense change, with change comes challenges. This change is, instead of fighting on the same side as his family, he has to fight on the opposite side. What happens to all of that confidence? It begins to crack. His worldly confidence, his learnedness, all of that begins to crack and he succumbs to fear. Fear is expressed in many ways. At a lighter level, it's expressed as stress. At a deeper level, it's expressed as anxiety. All of chapter 1 of Gita accentuates this fear. This is the symptom. The next chapter highlights the source. What is the source of fear? In Arjuna's life, in our life? Selfishness. Chapter 2 identifies this source as, Arjuna, you are being selfish. Instead of being a long-term thinker that wants to embrace this challenge, you are being a short-term thinker that wants to escape. And then in chapter 3 begins the solution. If there's a symptom, there has to be a source. If there's a source, there has to be a solution. And that solution is known as nishkama karma, or selflessness. Obviously, the cure to selfishness is selflessness. I'm sharing this with all of you because today is a special day in Niagara Falls. We are celebrating our health fair. And this year we have the most comprehensive health fair where there's a focus not just on the body, but also the mind and also the intellect. The word health in Sanskrit is swasthatha. Swasthatha, which means to be established in yourself. In other words, not to be insecure. A great sign of being healthy is to not have a sense of insecurity. And the opposite of that is swartha, where one's only purpose is oneself. It's to be selfish. A selfish person is always feeling insecure. No, that person said this, that person doesn't like me. My focus in our health fair is cultivating ideals in the intellect. To evolve from the sense of insecurity to security. And the best way to approach this subject is comparing a selfish personality to a selfless one. That is Hiranyakashipu and Prahlada. And what's amazing about this comparison is they're in the same family. A father and a child, or a parent and a child. There are 12 skandhas, or sections, of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on the 7th. The 7th is known as Uti, and Uti means how vasanas expresses karma, or how nature expresses as desires and thoughts and actions. In other words, the deeper part of you. What is to be noted about this is that nature is powerful. Some of us have a nature that we just can't shake. We can't change. But what this skandha will teach us is that more powerful than nature is nurture. You can change. You can evolve. It requires steadiness and sincerity. And the one verse that we had studied in our last class to highlight this, Gopya kamad bhayat kamsaha dveshachedyadayo nirpaha sambandhat vrishnaya snehat yuyam bhaktya vayam vibho. There are 6 types of nurture that are highlighted. One is the gopis, they thought of development, they thought of happiness in the form of kama, or lust. They wanted to marry God. Bhayat kamsaha, another is a thinking that's relating to fear. To be afraid of the Creator, to be afraid of God, is another form of development. Dvesha, chedi adi nirpaha. Chedi is a name for Shishupal. Him, others, other kings, they all related to their creator in the form of hatred. So lust, fear, hatred. The Vrishnis, the family of Bhagavan Krishna, they felt a sambandha towards him, a familial sense. That's how they thought about development and happiness. Yuyam bhaktya. You, referring to Raja Yudhishthira, your relationship with the Creator is one of devotion. And finally, Vayam, that is Rishi Narada. All of the sages, their relationship with God is through Sneha was Raja Yudhishthira, Bhakti was, or is Rishi Narada. So these are different types of remembrances, and the key point here is, as you think, so you develop. Nature is powerful. What's more powerful? Nurture. How do you nurture yourself? By thinking, because whatever you think of, you start to develop into that. And whether it's lust, or fear, or hatred, or care, or affection, or devotion, you will develop into that. Now we continue. One of the most popular portions of this scripture, one of the most productive portions of this scripture, really encourages the cultivation of ideals in the intellect. That's why our health fair and this class are overlapping well. And I'm going to go straight to that portion. For those who are regularly in our class, in our next class, I'll rewind and forward with more details. But for now, we'll go to a portion which I think many of you already know. Nonetheless, I'll explain this in more detail. Okay? So, follow along. Shravanam kirtanam Vishnoho Smaranam padasevanam Archanam vandanam dasyam Sakyam atmanivedanam Iti pumsarpita Vishnau Bhaktischin navalakshana Kriyate bhagavat yadha Tanmanyedhitamuttamam. This is, in the 7th skanda, the 5th adhyaya, the 23rd and 24th shlokas, all lines. This is known as the Navada Bhakti. So let me share some more thoughts before I elaborate on this. Hiranyakashipu, one who is selfish, he wants to be the creator. He feels like he is the creator. A selfish person thinks the whole world revolves around them. Hiranyakashipu puts an effort to as if become the creator. Now we all know, with great power comes great responsibility. But in Hiranyakashipu's case, the more his power grew, the more irresponsible he became. We tend to see that with a lot of people. You see that with athletes, you see that with politicians, you see that with entertainers. As they become more influential, it's almost like they're bored, so they begin to behave in unbecoming ways. He should have become more responsible, but he actually starts to become more indulgent. He feels, I have access to everything, I can live more indulgently. But what's so fascinating about this, one of the phrases that is shared about his indulgence, na tripti. Even though he's inputting everything, he still does not feel complete. There's no tripti. Now, many of you are thinking about this externally. Yeah, that's Hiranyakashipu. I feel that's the story of so many of us. We literally have everything that we could ever want outside, yet no completeness. So, who is Hiranyakashipu? For us to bring this to life. So that's selfishness. Now we'll go to Prahlada. Prahlada, unlike Arjuna is learned but not wise. Prahlada is an icon of wisdom. He didn't just know it, he actually lived it also. In reading how he related to others, here's 2 highlights. Anyone that he studied with, and he's a 5-year-old boy, anyone he studied with, anyone he lived with, felt that Prahlada is my closest friend. Think about who you feel to be your closest friend. Why do you feel they're closest to you? It's because they help you in a meaningful way. Not because they give you a gift, not because you go on vacation with them, but they help you to be a better person. And that's what Prahlada is. Another lovely insight is that even though he experienced intense difficulty, he was never shaken by it. Whether it's health, his or someone else's, gaining respect, losing respect. And I shared with all of you, you know that the only certainty is uncertainty, so why be shaken by it? You knew daylight savings time was coming, why are you tired? Yes? So this is Prahlada. Prahlada was living in a Gurukula. He was living away, a boarding school. And one day he had come back. It was vacation, reading week, yes? March break. He was on March break. And his father wanted to know, what have you been studying? So his father puts Prahlada on his lap and says, what have you learned? Teach me something. And Prahlada starts talking about long-term thinking, about how happiness is inside, how we should be humble. And his father was totally shocked by this, because he's the opposite. And he just ignores his son. We tend to do that too. When our kids actually share something that's relevant to us, we ignore it, no? That sense of escapism, what do you know? So Hiranyakashipu is like that too. But then as he thought about it more, he thought this was a case of espionage. He thought that the teachers he had hired to teach his son were actually brainwashing him. So he calls them aside. Their names are Shanda and Amarka. And says, what are you teaching my son? I'm the creator. There is no other creator. And they said, we're not teaching him this. He's like this. He's your son. Some parents are like that with me also, that their kids are becoming distracted or rogues, so they'll come to me and say, Vivekji, talk to him. Do something to her. And I don't say it, but I do feel it. They're your kids. What have you done to them? What have you said to them? And so these teachers, they devise a plan that they're only going to teach Prahlad and all of these kids that there are not 4 Purusharthas, but there's only 3. There's not 4 purposes in life. There's only Dharma, which is position, Artha, which is possession, and Kama, which is pleasure. In life, there is no peace. Sounds like your corporate jobs, no? Who cares if you're unhappy? As long as you have position and possession and pleasure, there is no peace. I think so many of us believe that now. That you can't be married and be happy. You can't have kids and be healthy. So this is what they devise. Now, one day, Prahlad's back in the Gurukula, and they're doing something. So Prahlad calls all of those little boys and girls around and says, listen to me. This is the origin of the first Balavihar class. Prahlada was the first Balavihar teacher, so all of you, there's your role model. And he shares with all of them. And here's where I really want you to tune in. I'm going to share 9 rungs, from rung 1 to rung 9, on how to make the intellect louder so that the mind becomes quieter. How to bring ideals in our lives so we don't feel complacent. Rung number 1 is Shravana. Point to me your Shravana. Point it to me. Shravana technically means listening. Now I'm going to try to make this more practical. Input. You should input Shastra. What is the English word for Shastra? Science. You should input the science of happiness. We study so many sciences like biology and chemistry and history and so on, but you don't become history. You don't become physiology. You should input science, the science of happiness, because if you input this, you will become this. Rung 1. Rung 2 is kirtana. Kirtana in English means to sing. How I want you to practice this is output shloka. I'm going to keep on balancing this with input and output. Output shloka. I just read a shloka to you, right? Now there's many of you who have no connection to this shloka. You have no connection to Sanskrit. What if you can output shloka? You can engage in kirtana as a form of concentration. Some time ago, I was subscribed to an online game called Lumosity. Anyone else? Lumosity. It's a game that encourages your brain to work. They proclaim that it'll prevent Alzheimer's. And to an extent, they're right. If you use it, you don't lose it. So if you know the meaning of these verses, that's good. And if you don't know the meanings, try to memorize them. Try to memorize some verses from Gita or Vishnu Sahasranama. Use your brain. We play games like memory, right? But as we get older, we stop doing that, and everything is electronic. If it's not on my phone, how will I know your number? Kirtana. Number 3 is smarana. In English, smarana means to remember. Input sankalpa. The word sankalpa means intention. In schools today, in corporations, they have programs. What are those programs called? Mindfulness. The genesis or the origin of mindfulness is actually to be intentional, which we call sankalpa. Before you engage in any puja, what do you have to do? Take a sankalpa. Before you go on a yatra, what do you have to do? Take a sankalpa. What is your intention? Why are you doing this? As you begin your day, school, work, errands, any major activity in your day, sankalpa. Check yourself. Why are you doing what you're doing? You input that. Input shastra, output shloka. Input sankalpa, here's rung number 4, sevana. Seva in English means to serve. Output sangraha. I said sangraha, not, we already do that, no problem. Sangraha means welfare. It's known as loka sangraha. Your service should not be towards your benefit, should not be for your utility. That's not called service then. If you serve for recognition, you are not serving. If you serve so your name can be somewhere, you are not serving then. Most of us serve now because we get a certificate from it, isn't it? You can only graduate from high school if you forcefully serve. This should be natural, and it will be if it's about sangraha. How do you unite people? People you like, people you dislike also. In the Niti Shastra, we highlighted that. Sevana. Number 5 is archana. Rung 5 is archana. Archana means pray, offer. Even most archanas don't know what their names mean also. Here's where I want you to input sadhana. Input sadhana. When it comes to seva, we tend to make this as a hobby. Yes? Most of us do this as part of our lifestyle. But archana is where you integrate the hobby to become your lifestyle. I started playing soccer when I was 4 years old. It was a hobby of mine. But the more I played it, I started playing for our high school team. I was captain one year. I started playing for the city on a traveling team. And I was going to become a professional soccer player for Team Canada, but then the Vedanta course presented itself. So I knew intellect is more important than body. But isn't that what a professional player would do? that hobby becomes their lifestyle. Sadhana. You go to input that this means is going to lead me to the ends, but you have to know the ends. Then it becomes a means, yes? Rung 6 is Vandana, a very popular name. What does Vandana mean? Vandana is popularity, yes? Vandana means, again, to praise, to pray. I want you to output Shila. What does Shila mean? All the kids, Vivekji's wife. Output Vivekji's wife. Are you saying that publicly? Shila means character, conduct, behavior, manners, civic responsibility. Once you are clear about the ends, you should make sure your means, every part of what you do, is aligned with those ends. Shila. That means you can't have a closet personality, yes? When we are at a dinner party, when we're at a gathering, we may be very polite to our family members. We say, dear, but then when we come home, dear. It's so different, right? There's that closet personality. Things are fragmented. But for someone who's engaged in Vandana, they're outputting Shila. This is not part-time. This is full-time. This is who you're becoming. Number 7 is Dasya. In each of these rungs, it's almost like a steeper rung. To get from 1 to 2 is smaller than to get from 5 to 6. In English, what does Dasya mean? To be a servant, someone who lives underneath someone. The practicality, how do you cultivate this? Input Shushka. Shushka means dry. Shushka means simple. See, the feeling with Dasya is that your body belongs to someone else. If I'm a servant, then really my directions come from my master. If I am devoted to discipline, if I'm devoted to welfare, then this body should get the minimum. Shushka. I should only drink water and I don't need tasty drinks. I don't need comfort. So you slowly disidentify from this body because it doesn't belong to you. Input Shushka. In the Niti Shastra we studied, if you want Vidya, you can't have Sukha. If you want to evolve, you cannot have comfort. If you want Sukha, that is comfort, you will not evolve. Input Shushka. The next rung is Sakhya. Sakhya means friend. To be a servant of a master, there's quite a distance there. It's almost like the difference between a subordinate and a CEO versus a subordinate and their direct manager. There's less of a distance there. Sakhya, to be the friend of the Creator, to be the friend of happiness. How to cultivate this is output smriti. What does smriti mean? It means remembrance, and remembrance always takes you to the past. And if you're going to the past, you have a strong propensity to compare. To compare. I remember when you used to be my friend, and I'm judging you, isn't it? I remember when the times were good. All old people talk like that, isn't it? Society's become like that. Kids have become like that. Every generation says that, no? But if you output smriti, what that really means is you're no longer affected by likes and dislikes. You're disidentifying from the mind. You know that you're deeply identified with the mind if you have likes and dislikes. It's very anti-social media, no? The Navada Bhakti will destroy social media. And finally is Atma. Dasya, okay, imagine this is happiness. Here's Dasya, correct? Here's Sakhya, And here's Atma. How to cultivate this is input swarupa. Input swarupa. Where does your ego live? In what part of you? Intellect. It is the intellect that feels I'm the doer. Then it passes it on to the mind that I'm the deserver. Likes, dislikes. Then what happens to my body? I want that comfort. So you have to go deeper. Atma is I'm inputting swarupa that I'm not the ego, but I am the spirit. I'm not going to try to find happiness outside because I am happiness. Have you heard of the Navada Bhakti like this before? I like it. I feel that this is a really tactile way of taking that which tends to be poetic on how to, rung by rung, climb. So to review this one more time, you tell me this back, okay? You give me the input, output, and whatever I said. Rung 1, Shravana. What is it? Input, Shastra. Rung 2, Kirtana. Output, Shloka. Rung 3 is Smarana. Input, Sankalpa. Rung 4, Sevana. Output, Sangraha. Rung 5, Archana. Input, Sadhana. Rung 6, Vandana. Output, Shila. Rung 7, Dasya. Input, Shushka. You're letting go of the body, that identification. Rung 8, Sakya. Output, Smriti. You're letting go of the mind now. The mind's propensities, you're dropping that. And finally, rung 9, Atma. Input, Swarupa. Is to shift from I am happy to I am happiness. And for all of those in Niagara particularly, those prayers that I chanted at the beginning, those prayers are showing what the purpose of our whole life and course is, to learn how to contemplate on the self, because the self is happiness. These are 9 instructions to cultivate ideals in the intellect, and when the intellect is filled with ideals, that's where that ego is dissolved into the spirit. But as long as the intellect is not filled with ideals, what's going to be louder, the intellect or the mind? The mind is. You have to fill the intellect with ideals so that the intellect is louder and the mind is quieter. And this is exactly what happens in Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna first gives Bhagavan Krishna instructions. The mind is louder than the intellect. But as the teachings go on and experience goes on, who gives who instructions? Bhagavan Krishna is giving Arjuna instructions. The intellect becomes louder and the mind becomes quieter. Oh.